Hello, everyone. Hi, so lovely to be here today, speaking to you at the Women in Construction Summit. How exciting! I hope you're pumped. I hope you've been listening to great speakers already. It's really exciting time of the year, especially as we're on the countdown to the back end of the year. How can we repaint our industry? How can we rebuild? How can we build inclusivity? How can we get more diverse? I am so pumped about this subject, and that's why I'm part of this whole thing, this part of this conference, and I'm so excited about it all. Last year, I was at the live event. It was my first conference. It was so pumped. You should have seen Sarah McAlpine. You should have seen Sarah Beal. There was lots of great speakers. I took a lot from there. I went out from there, and I've so far I've done different things to impact my world, to play my part when it comes to building a diverse and inclusive industry. We wouldn't have it any other way. We would not have it any other way when it comes to building diversity and inclusion in leadership. So I'll be talking to you today about rewriting the blueprint for inclusion in leadership. Rewriting the blueprint for inclusion in leadership. A bit of background about myself. My name is IJ Samuel, and I am a project controls trailblazer, a PMO leader, and I'm currently working on HS2 as the interim head of scope and change. It's a mega project, it's a mega program, it's Europe's largest infrastructure project, and I'm sure you probably would have heard about it on the news. But my background stems from my time as a control systems engineer. And in that time, I've progressed from control systems engineer into project management and project controls. So yes, what qualifies me to be talking about this subject today? I'm going to tell you all about what I know when it comes to my journey in building a diverse and inclusive team. My journey when it comes to empowering people, my journey when it comes to what we do on mega projects, and how inclusion can drive the future of our businesses, how diversity can drive the future of what we are establishing here in construction. Yes, let's dig in. I will be sharing some slides. I may not see some questions come through as I'm sharing the slides. We'll unpack this subject of rewriting the blueprint for inclusion in leadership. I may not see your hands go up. If you have any questions, hold those thoughts, and I'll come back to your questions at the back end of my session today. Okay, so bear with me. Let me share my screen and share some slides. Rewriting the blueprint for inclusion in leadership. Rewriting the blueprint for inclusion in leadership. All right. Hopefully you can see my screen. Hopefully you can see my screen. Right, okay, so let's dig straight into it. What three things are we going to cover today? Our intention today is to talk about what helps and hinders inclusion. How can you connect with key leaders for change in your business? How can we play our part to champion inclusion as an everyday reality? How can we make that an everyday reality? Regardless of whether you have the qualifications, regardless of whether you feel that you have something to offer or not, how can everyone play their part when it comes to championing inclusion? And hopefully that will get you pumped up to walk away from today to go and understand how you can actually play your part and take tangible action as you live here today. Okay, so I run with a mantra when I say inclusion starts with me. Inclusion equally starts with you. In 1962, when John F. Kennedy, the United States president at the time, he was making a visit to NASA Center at the time. Something very interesting happened on that trip. Whilst he was walking down the corridor within NASA Center, you can imagine how busy, how geeky or interesting the NASA Center would be. But he walked past the janitor and he did stop to ask him, what do you do? Quite interesting that the president would find time to pause to have that conversation. And right there, when we say inclusion starts with you, it's not in the big magical things. It's in those little moments where you stop and you recognize that inclusion starts with you making time to have a conversation with someone who may not look like you, who may not act like you, who may not talk like you. But making that time to pause and engage can be a big transformation in making someone else feel included within your team or within your business. So John F. Kennedy asked this cleaner at the time, "What do you do?" And his response will shock you, for those of you who may not have heard the story before. This guy just simply said, "I'm here to help put a man on the moon. I'm here to help put a man on the moon." It's interesting because the way that he responded to the question about, "I'm here to put a man on the moon," you would think that he should have said, "I'm a cleaner." He should have said his job title. He should have said, "Well, I've been here for the last 15 years. Nothing works in this company, but I'm glad you asked." He could have chosen to moan. But his answer was, "I'm here to put a man in the moon." What do you see is the bigger question. What do you see? What do you see? How do you describe yourself? When someone says, "What do you do?" How do you describe yourself? How do you describe the change that you bring? How do you describe your contribution? How do you describe the value that you add? What do you see? It's two ways, right? We say inclusion starts with me, inclusion starts with you. It's not all about what others can do for you. What do you see for yourself? And I know that sometimes when you feel excluded in certain tables, you might feel very, you might shy away from just opening up your world to see the bigger picture. But if you can't see it, sometimes it's difficult for you then to imagine it, for you then to be it. What do you see? What narrative do you use to describe yourself? And do you know the key leaders for change? When we talk about rewriting the blueprint for inclusion in leadership, that blueprint, we can rewrite it at the grassroots level, but also we can rewrite it at a very macro level, okay? Do you know those key leaders that drive change within your business, within your industry? Do you even get it? It's the bigger question right here. Do you get what moves the dial here? Are you stuck up in la la land, or do you really get what moves the dial when it comes to where your industry is headed, when it comes to where your company is headed? Do you understand the bigger picture? Do you know what keeps your manager awake at night? When we're talking about rewriting the blueprint for inclusion in leadership, do you know those key goals and priorities for senior management, for your senior leadership team? Do you understand what those key goals are? Do you know what your company goals, the bigger picture? Some businesses are looking at how do we stay afloat beyond the next 2-3 months, right? But also some businesses are looking at, this is where we're headed in the next 12 months. And if we survive Corona, this is where we're headed, right? But do you personally know where the business is headed? Are you waiting to be told, or will you make an effort to find out? We're talking about rewriting the blueprint for inclusion in leadership across every level. It's not so much about at the top level, it's equally at your own level, whether you've got the right credentials or not. How can you play your part if you don't get the bigger picture? And I dare to ask if you know where we fit in. Yes? Do you know what your purpose is? What wells you up? How do you, it may not be everyone's cup of tea, but it has to. When we're talking about repainting the industry, when we talk about rewriting the blueprint for inclusion in leadership, it stems from your purpose from within. You investing your time and energy, a seat at the table, making opportunities for others who may never get invited to take a seat at the table. So when we talk about building an inclusive future, rewriting the blueprint for inclusion in leadership, it does need a lifeline. It does need a lifeline. There are so many, when you look at leadership within your business, I mean, take a look around within your business. would you say, hand on heart, it is diverse? Okay, we are getting more diverse in construction. Is it inclusive? Is the bigger question I ask. I dare to ask. Look around your current leadership team. It could be a 2-man business. It could be a 4,000 man business. It could be hundreds of thousands, but what does that leadership team look like for you? Do you think is inclusive? Question mark. And how can you play your part if you think there's a missing link? There's work to be done by everyone. We all have a part to play, whether you're a business owner, whether you are the employer, whether you're a manager, whether you're just a team member. There is work for everyone to do when it comes to playing our part to rewrite the blueprint for inclusion in leadership. This is no time for anyone to sit back. This is time for us to roll our sleeves and get to work. We want to rewrite the blueprint for inclusion in leadership. We need to get to work. So let's think about how can we play our part as an employer. Okay, so from the bigger picture of sharing the vision, do you understand what the inclusion gap in your leadership team looks like? If you don't understand what the gap is, if you don't understand how big the hole is, how would you be able to plug the gap? How would you be able to do different if you don't recognize a baseline position from where you are today? Some businesses will be miles ahead from where others are. Some will be behind. But do you understand that inclusion gap? Let's assume you do, or you get to work to understand what your baseline position is when it comes to the inclusion gap you have in your leadership space. Then you put a vision in place. You need to be able to have a clear vision of how you're going to bridge the gap. Most importantly, it's sharing that vision, taking people on the journey. I hear a lot of people who say that, I don't know what my business is doing. I don't know where we're headed when it comes to closing the inclusion gap in leadership. And I challenge them to say, do you know the vision of the business? If the people are not taking on the journey of what your vision is, what chance have you got to actually close this gap when it comes to inclusion in leadership? You need to be able to set clear targets to sponsor a seat at the table. Far too long, the tables does not look inclusive at all in many industries and construction especially. We can go around the subject of within gender balance. We can go around the subject when you talk about Black, Asian, ethnic minority professionals. We can go around and talk about the LGBT professionals. We can go around and talk about disabled professionals. We can go around this subject on so many lenses, so many layers, and we can actually say that leadership tables are not inclusive right now. We need to have clear target interventions for how we will close that gap, okay? And as an employer, you need to be willing to invest in your people to enable and create that environment that will help them to flourish. It's no saying about it. That's what responsible employers would do. Now, let's fast track and look at how can managers play their part. A quick cheer if you're a manager in the room, quick cheer for managers in the room. There's a part for everyone to play to unlock the doors when it comes to rewriting the blueprint for inclusion in leadership. You have a part to play when it comes to cascading that vision. You need to be able to cascade the vision. You need to be in a position where you can clarify expectations. How would people understand where the business is headed if you don't clarify the inclusive goals, inclusive plan, inclusive vision, if you don't clarify that for them? You need to also equally make this information accessible and available to your team members. You have to make the information accessible and available. What we find in so many organizations is that you find out that there's so much going on in the background. There's so much documentations left in draft status. There's nothing published because it's been in draft status for a long time. People have got no information to go to when it comes to understanding your D&I plans, understanding your inclusion targets, understanding where you're headed when it comes to your plans to close the gap. for inclusion in leadership. Managers need to take accountability and be held accountable for the part that they play when it comes to rewriting the blueprint for inclusion in leadership. You need to be willing to invest in your team. It's not about investing in the ones that look like you. It's not in investing in the ones that sound like you. It's not investing in the ones that get it quickly the way you love them to. It's being able to open up yourself to invest in your team. It takes a lot from you. And that's part of the responsibility for us in management, okay? And how can we play our part now as team members? I told you, everyone's got a part to play when it comes to rewriting the blueprint for inclusion in leadership. Everyone has a part to play. Are you someone who wakes up every day with that top performance mindset? Are you spotting the gap? And then you have a top performance mindset that I'm going to spot the gap. I'm going to be the solution to plug the gap as well. Or are you someone with an employee mindset? Give me everything, give me everything, give me everything that you can give me in this business. I'm here to take from the business. And you have zero contribution that you're willing to make apart from turn up and do your job. How are we able to do that and thrive and build an inclusive business? We need to step up and step out of our comfort zone to have uncomfortable conversations when it comes to rewriting that blueprint in leadership, the blueprint for inclusion in leadership. You need to be willing to spot the gap at any level. You need to be willing to plug the gap. Everyone has a part to play, I told you. You need to be able to see the bigger picture. That's where it all stems from. If you don't see that there is a problem, then there's nothing that will well up within you to want to fix that problem. So let's talk about a few things that we can do again in terms of when it comes to rewriting that blueprint for inclusion in leadership. How can every single one of us play our part? So I'll give you very practical tips, very practical examples when it comes to playing our part for inclusion in leadership. If you spot a team meeting that's put in at a time when you know that you may not have children, but you know you have colleagues who do school run, and a meeting is put at that time in the morning, you can flag this to your manager to say that personally, I'm not affected, but I'm concerned that other members of the team may not be able to make this meeting due to this. When you speak up for someone, it helps them actually in their progression, because the more they don't turn up to that sort of meeting, the likelihood that they will get excluded. And over time, you see that they begin to pull back and they may not be able to progress quicker, and they may never be able to get a seat at the table. It all stems from the little things of today. We're talking about rewriting the blueprint for inclusion in leadership. When you're in a meeting and you're making a presentation, you're delivering a presentation, you're looking at different people, or maybe just a normal team meeting, but you may have a habit of just looking at certain people within the room without locking eyes with everyone in the room. Sometimes it's just by habit. Sometimes you don't even know you're doing it, but there's someone who makes a valid point in the room and you always give that person the time of day. And all the other people in the room, doesn't really matter what they say. We're talking about rewriting the blueprint for inclusion in leadership. We all have a part to play. Okay. How about this one? Inclusive networking. A lot of the socials that we do, sometimes you have them after work, after hours, and then you realize that you have some members of the team who again could be excluded. It's one that you have to flag. Can we rotate this social so they are not always after work? Can we have them sometime in the morning, sometime at lunchtime, and sometime after work? Inclusion starts with each and every one of us playing our parts. You don't have to have a master's degree to have a heart to include others. Okay? How about support in team meetings? We talked about that one. But if you're on the client side as well, it's something that sometimes you tend to focus on the people that you look at as the people that you relate with. The confidence that you can instill in those team members is a lot. Again, if you're someone who at the start of every meeting, you are always asked to take meeting notes. As a team member, how can you play your part to grow, to feel included? You can flag to someone else if you don't have the courage to say it to your manager. You can equally say, I would love to rotate this note taking or the minutes of meeting. Can it be rotated, especially if it's not your core role? That's a question that you can ask. We're talking about inclusion, rewriting the blueprint for inclusion in leadership. How can you become a champion for inclusion when you don't have those credentials, when you don't have the qualifications to do so? So it stems from having new mindsets. It's a new mindset, having new results that you're working towards. See the big picture, be a problem solver, be adaptable, communicate with purpose. You need to be able to communicate with purpose. Let people know by your actions that you want to build inclusion in everyday things that you do. I talk about inclusion starts with me. Who can I make room for in my leadership call, in my leadership meeting? Who can you say to your manager, can I come and observe this meeting? And if you're a manager, are you able to offer someone down the chain an opportunity to come and observe you in a meeting? Just so they get the understanding of, I mean, some board meetings here, you wouldn't get the opportunity to do that because of the confidential nature of what's been discussed. But some other meetings, you can have someone who is miles away from the leadership spectrum of where you are as maybe a leader of the business. You can invite them to come in and just observe the meeting. How can you make people feel included? It's an everyday reality for each and every one of us. And inclusion needs a lifeline. If we have to rewrite the blueprint for inclusion in leadership, it starts with me, it starts with you. Will you consciously make room to invest in others? Will you consciously make out time to pull up others who may never get invited to sit at the leadership table? Inclusion starts with me, inclusion starts with you. Let's rewrite that blueprint for inclusion in leadership. Right, so when it comes to rewriting the blueprint for inclusion, we all have a part to play. As an employer, as a business owner, you have a part to play. As a manager, you have a part to play. As a team member, you have a part to play. We can all walk away from today knowing fully well that we can make room for others who may never get invited to sit at leadership tables. Let's go ahead and rewrite the blueprint for leadership. I'd love to connect with you. You can find me on LinkedIn, IJ Samuel. You can find me on Instagram, ij.samuel. Let's connect. Let's chat. I do a lot of mentoring. I do a lot of leadership incubator program as well, where I make room to invest in others so that they can also get the opportunity to understand how they can move forward with their career and also how they can go back and drive change within their business. Let's connect. If you have any questions for me, now is the time to ask away. Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen so I can see who's got a question for me. Let me stop sharing my screen. Let's keep it real. If you have any question for me, go ahead and ask away. If you have any question for me, just go ahead and ask away. It's been a journey when we talk about diversity and inclusion within our businesses, but yeah, let's keep talking. Let's keep talking and let's go ahead and rewrite the blueprints for inclusion in leadership.